Should you supplement with vitamin D? I'm gonna answer that in this next video. If you're thinking about supplementing with vitamin D, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, why do you think you need vitamin D? Or more importantly, why do you think you need to get vitamin D from a pill? Vitamin D is available most readily through sunshine. Direct sunlight hitting the skin is synthesized by your body into the active form of vitamin D. But the question is, can you get that effect from a vitamin D supplement? The research states that that is very inconclusive. You have a lot of studies that show that vitamin D supplementation is not an effective way to actually raise your vitamin D status. Now, there's plenty of studies that show that vitamin D status can be increased by vitamin D supplementation, but these studies were done in such a way that they didn't use the correct controls, they didn't use the correct population data, or maybe the study itself was too short in time duration or included too few people. So the research on actual vitamin D supplementation at its best is inconclusive. In a lot of cases, vitamin D supplementation works. In many cases, vitamin D supplementation did not work. The biggest question that we have with vitamin D is the vitamin D actually doing all of the things that we think it does? Mainstream information will tell us that vitamin D protects us from cancer, protects us from diabetes, helps make our bones stronger. But when you actually break down the data, there's a lot of conflicting information. Take, for instance, these studies here. This study specifically shows that vitamin D supplementation helped reduce insulin resistance in populations of South Asian women who were deficient in vitamin D. But then you have this study that shows that vitamin D supplementation actually increased the risk of insulin resistance. So on one hand, you have vitamin D deficiency leading to insulin resistance, and on the other hand, you have vitamin D toxicity causing insulin resistance. What's a girl to think? Now, it's the same thing with cancer. A lot of people will tell you that vitamin D deficiency can lead to an increase in cancer. Vitamin D supplementation did not, in fact, help reduce instances of cancer, with the exception of colorectal cancer. Another huge issue with trying to understand vitamin D is this whole chicken and the egg thing. Are your health problems happening because you're deficient in vitamin D? Or are your health problems contributing to your deficiency of vitamin D? Cholesterol is the perfect example of what I'm trying to illustrate here. Cholesterol is needed by the body to actually synthesize the sunlight into vitamin D itself. At the same time, you have this idea that vitamin D can actually lower LDL cholesterol and raise HDL cholesterol. So do you need cholesterol before the vitamin D comes, or does vitamin D actually raise the cholesterol itself? Vitamin D seems to lower circulating LDL cholesterol while also raising HDL cholesterol, which is really an ideal situation. But then again, cholesterol is needed for the production of vitamin D. So is it cholesterol helps vitamin D, or does vitamin D help cholesterol? Heart disease is another very big topic when it comes to something like vitamin D. A lot of people believe that vitamin D can help stave off heart disease. But the problem is there's no conclusive evidence anywhere that shows that this is in fact the case. So take, for instance, this meta-analysis that was recently published in JAMA. This meta-analysis looked at 21 randomized clinical trials, including more than 83,000 individuals, and what they found was that vitamin D supplementation, in fact, does not confer cardiovascular protection and is not indicated for this purpose. But there's a huge problem with this meta-analysis and these studies in general, which is that these studies had limitations. Most of the included trials had not pre-specified cardiovascular disease as the endpoint and were underpowered for cardiovascular events. It seems like you would want to make cardiovascular disease your endpoint if you're studying the effects of vitamin D supplementation as it relates to cardiovascular disease. We also have this meta-analysis which comes from the Cochrane database, which includes 56 randomized trials, including 95,000 different people, and what they conclude is that vitamin D3 seemed to decrease mortality in elderly people living independently on institutionalized care. Now, because of the weaknesses of these independent trials, including risks of attrition, bias, and dropouts, they're not able to make an actual conclusion as to whether supplementing with vitamin D is good or not. So really, in the end, if you know you're vitamin D deficient, if you've been told by your doctor you're vitamin D deficient, the best thing you can do is to not, in fact, supplement with vitamin D pills. What you should be trying to do is getting outside to absorb as much sunlight as you possibly can. I'd say you want to get outside when the sun is at its peak, sometime between 11 and 3 o'clock. If you can get your shirt off, if you can get that sunshine, you're going to be able to raise your vitamin D levels naturally. Remember that vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, meaning for you to actually get the effects of vitamin D, you need to have fat in your diet. And the best way to get fat in your diet is through things like animal fat, something like butter or cod liver oil, fish, red meats. But you always want to make sure that this stuff comes from a good source, because along with vitamin D being fat soluble, so are many of the toxins that come from polluted animals. So make sure if you're eating meat, it's grass-fed, grass-finished, organic. If it's fish, it's wild caught. If it's cod liver oil, it comes from a sustainable manufacturing facility. Thank you all for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.